So, what is prepping?
Yeah, and what is homesteading?
Let's talk about that.
Here we go. Yeah.
Wow. Well, hey everybody, I'm Bill.
And I'm Elizabeth with Live Simple.
Live Free. And you know, we cover many topics on this channel. I think probably many more than a lot of other channels do. We just broad stuff.
I think it's kind of just ended up being we're just, sharing all sorts of things in our life.
Yeah. So what are some of the things? We travel a lot, though we haven't done much this year because of the lockdown.
Right. I travel.
You do sewing.
I try to do some cooking, some sewing.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
You're like the handyman special.
Yeah, I do a lot of handy, DIY projects and stuff. So we do a lot of different things. But one of our main topics that we always have done is prepping. And for those of you who have joined us during 2020, you may or may not know that during the first 6 years of our channel, we were called Tiny House Prepper.
Right.
And prepping was actually how we got started.
Until we were no longer living in a tiny house. So now we just took our motto, live simple, live free.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the main topics that we cover is prepping. And so we wanted to really talk about that because, what is prepping really? It's preparing for any kind of emergency that might come up in the future.
It's funny, the word itself gets kind of a reaction of all sorts of crazy wild things, but all we're talking about is just making sure that you are prepared so that if something happens, you're going to be glad you have it.
Yeah, I think the term gets a bum rap because of that TV show, what was it called? Doomsday Preppers. I saw that and I thought, oh cool, I'm going to learn some stuff, and I watched it. I watched 2 or 3 episodes and I was done with it. Because every one of them were, building bunkers and howitzers and cannons and machine guns all around. And come on, get real, man. So it gets a bum rap for what it really is.
You mean prepping?
Prepping does, yeah. The term prepping. That's why we use emergency preparedness. It's
Right.
Anyway, really, there are 3 different approaches to preparing for emergencies in the future. What?
I'm just thinking of us spending all those years being tiny house emergency preparedness. And even just
Emergency preparednessers.
Yeah. So what is emergency preparedness? It can cover so many things. It can cover an illness or a loss of work. Mm-hmm. It can cover some kind of a huge storm, or for a lot of people, a hurricane, knocking out electricity for a while. There's all sorts of different ways. We've run across situations in our own life where, the crash in 2008, we lost so much of our income at that point. And then when I had the stroke, we lost income. So it just all sorts of different ways that just being prepared for an emergency can make a big difference. Mm-hmm. Like I said, and things that could knock electricity out for a while could be a biggie,
But the things that you're talking about are more short term.
Mm-hmm.
And, it can be anywhere from a week or 2 up to a couple of months. Things like illness and things like that too.
Right.
But there's also long-term emergencies. We're talking about, major economic crash, or we are coming into a grand solar minimum that I think is going to make food very hard to come by and very expensive in the future, and that's going to be a long-term sort of situation. Right. So when you prepare for the future, you're really preparing for anything, long-term or short-term, whether it's of your own making, like an illness, or whether it's something that not that you make the illness, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Whether it's just your own household, an illness, or a job loss, or whether it's something that affects the whole economy or the whole world, you're prepared and ready to go.
Right. Yeah, and it's important so that you can maintain your life and your health and the sanity of your children, and just so that you can kind of keep going. Also, I think it's very important because rather than being someone who is going to have to rely on somebody else to take care of you or to help, you can be somebody that not only doesn't need to deplete other people's resources or some kind of a government or FEMA resources or anything like that. You can also be somebody that maybe could be there to have ways to be able to help those around you. Mm-hmm. So it just, it just makes us able to be an asset even in the middle of an emergency kind of thing.
Right. Also, if you're prepared well in advance, then when emergencies come, you don't have to do any panic buying.
Right. So you're not part of the panic buying that's depleting everything in the store shelves and all that kind of stuff. I did find when everything started happening in March with the COVID-19 that I was glad that we just have had a tendency to kind of always buy a little bit of extra toilet paper because we have that kind of prepping mentality, so that when everything started getting kind of crazy with toilet paper, I didn't have to go buy any. I didn't have to worry about the shelves being empty. And by the time we kind of started needing a little bit more, it was there again. And I don't have to go buy, a bunch. I just had to start, getting some again. So, I don't know, it makes a difference in times when people are going to make a run on stores and things like that. Yeah.
So really, when you're talking about prepping or emergency preparedness, there are 3 different approaches. Each one has the same end goal, to be prepared for emergencies in the future, but each one has a totally different philosophy of how you go about that. And you can do one, or you can do a combination of 2 or 3, and you can just sort of pick and choose. But let's talk about those 3 different philosophies. One is prepping, one is homesteading, and the other is survivalist skills. So what is prepping? Someone who is 100% prepper and doesn't use any of the other skills, they purchase everything that they need to get through an emergency, and they store it away so that they're ready to go. Now, these people just generally kind of live a normal life where nobody else would even be able to tell that they're preppers. You can do this from the 14th floor of an apartment building in Manhattan or Chicago, and other people around you won't even know that you're preppers. You buy what you need, you store it away, maybe in your extra bedroom. You got your extra bedroom completely full of food or whatever. It's not a major life change kind of thing. You just live your life, but you buy extra stuff. And many times people don't even know that you're doing it. And then there's the homesteader. Now, homesteading is the new term for what used to be called small farm.
Yeah, called it a small farm, right?
Yeah, family farm.
Yeah.
And basically, in comparison, where a prepper would buy everything they need for the future, a homesteader would produce everything they need.
As much as possible.
Not only for the future, but also for current sustenance.
Yeah.
So they're either going to grow a garden or they're going to have animals and that sort of thing to produce everything that they need. And it's a self-sustaining lifestyle. And many times they are so self-sustaining that they can, even without thinking about prepping for the future, they can live for 6 months or a year because of how they produce their own stuff.
Right. I mean, stuff's been canned. There's things prepared and put away. Because my grandma was like that. There was always plenty of food in the cellar. Because every year her garden, she'd put it up, like they always talk about, and have stuff canned. And goodness, I think that they could live a long time on stuff that they had been growing.
Now, this is actually a way of life where you're going to, become a farmer, become a homesteader, become a small farmer, as opposed to being an accountant in the city and buying extra food like a prepper would.
Yeah.
And then the third one is a survivalist. And these are people who are skilled at living off the land. And we're talking foraging, hunting, trapping, and fishing.
And a lot of times somehow being able to make something that you need, because for some reason the situation is that it's hard to buy it. And so you learn how to make stuff.
Even to the point of knowing how to make shelters in the woods and that sort of stuff too.
Yeah.
So, now, we started our channel as preppers. And I started my prepping journey as a prepper. Because at the time, about 8 years ago, when I first started prepping, it really depends on the type of emergency that you're prepping for. And I truly believed, and I still do, that we are looking at an economic crash, because I don't think that our national deficit can be sustained. And that hasn't happened yet, but there's still a real possibility of that. But if that happens, the economic situation or the monetary system, whatever, is going to be reset. And that could take anywhere from a month to, I figured, up to a year. So I was thinking, okay, well, I want to prepare for a year. I want to have a year's worth of food and water and everything we need set aside.
Well, and I want to talk about that for a second. Also, within that, an economic crash doesn't mean necessarily that you can't get electricity or water out of your well or water from the city. But being prepared for emergencies does also, even under these circumstances, we've tried to include for ourselves, what would we do if for some reason the electricity was cut off, or, we no longer could have as easy access to water and things like that, so that, there are other emergencies, even in a pure prepping sense, that we've tried to feel like we could prepare for, that we could learn how to do.
Right. But over the past couple of years, I've learned about what's called the Grand Solar Minimum, and I've done quite a few videos about that. If you haven't seen them, I do have a playlist, and I'll put in the description below so you can see the Grand Solar Minimum. But basically, we are facing what I believe to be severe food shortages in the future because of cold weather crop losses. And this is not going to be 6 months or a year. This is going to be much more long term. We're talking possibly several decades. And so I'm not saying that food's not going to be available at all, but it's going to be much more expensive and much harder to find. So I am now starting to develop more into homesteading skills. That's why we started a garden this year for the first time, because I want to become more self-sustaining, self-supporting.
Well, and also we're in so much of a better situation for ourselves now, with having some room to garden.
Sure.
And I mean, our situation is so different now.
We couldn't garden before, one, because I didn't really think it was necessary, but also our lot used to be 50 feet by 100 feet, and that's smaller than some people's houses.
Well, and it was so shaded by these really beautiful big tall forest trees.
There was no sun in there to garden. Now we have an acre and a third, and it's all sunny and a nice, wonderful place for garden and orchard and other things. So our situation has changed, so we're definitely going to start more into homesteading skills.
Right.
I'm also very interested in learning some survival skills, foraging and things like that.
Yeah.
So those are the three different philosophies: prepping, homesteading, and survivalist. Let's look in a little bit more detail into each one. Prepping skills. They're the easiest to learn by far. But you do have to learn how to properly store and rotate your food. If food is not stored properly, it's going to go bad.
Right.
So you need to learn how to store it. Now, this is not going to be a how-to where we teach you how to store it. This is just an overall.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But you need to learn to store it. You also need to learn how to rotate it, because depending on what type of food you're storing and how you're storing it, it could last anywhere from just a year up to 25 years. Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to learn how to rotate it properly. And basically, you store what you eat, and you eat what you store.
That is so important.
You store what you eat. If you don't know how to eat beans and rice, almost everybody I know, first thing they do, they go out and buy a 50-pound bag of beans and rice. If you're not proficient at making many meals out of beans and rice, yeah, you can survive on it, but you will get super sick of it very fast if you don't normally eat that. So what you need to do is store the things that you normally eat so that your diet does not have to change in an emergency. And then you need to eat what you store, so that's how you rotate it. When you buy something from the grocery store, you don't just eat it and leave your storage there. You take the stuff you just bought and you put it in the back, and then you take the older stuff from the front and eat that, and that's how you rotate it.
Right. And of course, that's not going to work with fresh produce and stuff, but just talking about things that you would normally store, you want to be sure that's things that you're willing to eat.
Right.
That you want to eat.
I mean, even cans of stuff that you buy from the store, it's got an expiration date on it. It's usually several years out, and I really truly believe you can eat it way beyond the expiration date. But it's still good to rotate them. Always put your new stuff in the back and eat from the front as you rotate it through.
Well, that way you're not going to suddenly look and realize that you stored a bunch of stuff 10 years ago and it is way too far past the expiration date.
Right.
And then you realize you can't use it. I'll never forget someone that we knew some years back before we moved, who had bought this big thing that someone had sold to him, and there was like 50 pounds of, the usual 50 pounds of beans and a big thing of rice and all that, and he felt like, okay, I'm really set and I'm ready. And just out of curiosity, he went to check on it, and he realized that the rice was full of bugs, and that everything had gotten kind of yucky, and he just realized, my goodness, I can't use any of this. We have this pipe dream that if we just have this stuff there somewhere, then it'll somehow save us. But what is the reality of what it would be like to use it? What is practically going to be really what happens if we end up having to rely on that under some kind of an emergency situation?
Right. Now, as a prepper, you're not developing into the homesteading skills, but one thing that would be good to learn is canning, because even if you live in an apartment and you might be able to grow a few container pot things on your balcony, but that's not going to be enough to sustain you. So you can go to farmers markets and buy bushels of stuff in the fall and can them, bring them home and can them.
Or dehydrate them?
Yeah, either way. Yeah. So that's actually a much cheaper way, because you're going to get the produce much cheaper price and healthier, because they're fresh from the farm instead of going through the distribution channels and being months old. So you can buy bushels full of stuff and bring it home and can it or dehydrate it. And then in prepping, we're talking about a lot of other items as well, not only food but also water, solar lanterns, water filters, medicines, over-the-counter medicines, or quite honestly, I don't know what to do about prescription medicines, because the insurance company or the prescription, drugstore won't give it to you more than a month in advance. So I've never figured out what to do about that.
Nowadays, I've got a medicine I have to take all the time because of the stroke. And I can at least get 3 months ahead, but I don't know how to do any more than that.
Right.
I kind of feel like that if the point comes where I cannot get any medicine anymore, even though I've tried so hard, it's just going to have to be in God's hands. I don't know what to do.
So, you're also looking at things like toothpaste, toilet paper.
Which we've learned.
Yeah, feminine products. Have you thought about that? That's a serious issue. Family board games. During this lockdown with COVID, all the kids are home from school and everybody's rattling around and getting in each other's hair, and if the power should go out and there's no TV for them to watch,
no devices they can play on,
right, then what are you going to do? Right. Having family board games where you can actually get to know each other a little bit.
Right. Have some paper and pens around. We never use it anymore, but you might be glad you have it.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and then one thing that's very important in being a prepper is to maintain security. And a lot of people talking about getting guns and to protect your supply. I don't think so. The best way to protect it is just to simply remain anonymous. Don't let anybody know what you've got in your spare room. Yeah, because if they know that you've got it, and we come into an emergency where food is a serious short supply, your whole neighborhood will not be knocking on your door. But they won't do that if they don't know that you have it.
Well, and just, it doesn't make any sense to try to be all set up to defend it in whatever way, because that's realistically not going to be workable in the long haul.
Yeah, because realistically, unless we're looking at surviving a nuclear holocaust where there's almost everybody gone, there's going to be, the cops are still going to be here. And if you shoot somebody, first, what do you do with the body? But then the cops are going to be at your door, and then you have to deal with all that. And personally, I'd rather not. So remaining anonymous, I think, is your best defense. So that's prepping, buying everything that you need and storing it. And then there's homesteading. And here, like I mentioned earlier, homesteaders basically produce everything that they need. And it's really a way of life, where being a prepper isn't. It's just you do whatever you do and you buy some extra stuff and put it away for storage. But homesteading, you will become a farmer.
Well, you have to put the time in.
Right.
You put the time in.
And it's not only preparing for the future and for future emergencies, but also using what you produce to put on your table right now.
And making sure you sustain and maintain all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the most part, in order to be a homesteader, you got to have land. And you got to have at least a little bit of acreage. You can do it on an acre, but it'll be tight. But it's, I think a typical homesteader or a small farm probably has anywhere from like 3 to 10 acres, something like that.
Right.
But you pretty much have to have acreage. Now, I know that you can do urban gardening. If you have a half-acre lot in the suburbs, you can raise an amazing amount of food.
Or on the roof of a building in a city. There's all sorts of possibilities.
Yeah. But there's a good chance that the zoning in that situation will not allow any kind of animals. So
you have to find out.
It's sort of a cut down homestead, abbreviated homestead.
Well, you just combine the best that you can.
Yeah. But really it's a different mentality of raising and growing everything that you need and for your current sustenance as well as for the future. And so not only do you have to have the land, you have to learn how to garden.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're starting into, is learning how to garden. And what I've discovered is that gardening is really easy. You just put the seed in there, water it, and the plant grows.
Yeah.
But it's really hard because every plant has a different requirement. And some would go better together than others, and some you need more water, some you need less water, more acid or more
weird
alkaline.
things start happening to them, and you got to find out why.
So it's definitely something that if you've never done it, you want to start now and learning gardening skills, and that's right where we're at. We're just finishing our first, getting close to our first season, and some things went really well, some things not so much.
Not so much. I'm thrilled it went as well as it did. It's been a long time ago. We had that way back when our kids were little, that we ever had a garden, and that was under such different circumstances.
And that was like 35 years ago.
Right. So I really feel like it's been such a learning process.
Yeah. There's also a big difference between gardening as a hobby and gardening for your survival.
And gardening because you really want to make sure that food grows.
Right.
Right.
So, and then of course, besides gardening, you got to learn canning if you've never done that, so you can preserve all the food that you do grow.
And learning where to find the jars and the lids, which we finally did.
And then many cases, you got to learn animal husbandry. I was amazed that as soon as we started talking about we're going to put in a garden, I was amazed at how many people said, and when are you going to do chickens? And what about goats? And you got plenty of room for goats. And it's like, I'm just starting a garden. I'm not going to be a major homesteader here. But most homesteaders grow animals.
Well, sure. They have chickens, maybe goats or cows if they've got room for it for milk, and sure, and some, all sorts of different things.
Some people, instead of chickens, they'll grow ducks or pheasants. Even rabbits, grow rabbits.
Yep.
And so they have the animals, they tend the animals in order to get milk, eggs, and meat.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to do that, you have to learn how to butcher and how to process the meat. And that brings up another topic of meat.
And a person can certainly, my goodness, a lot of people are vegetarian or vegan. They can probably grow lots and lots of plants and different vegetables and fruits and stuff and eat well, But if someone is going to include any kind of meat in their diet, whether it's, fish or, chickens, just any kind of, meat itself into the diet, or certainly using eggs and things like that, you have to learn how to make that available to you, and so, if someone goes and just buys some meat at a store, somebody knew how to raise that animal, hopefully just, butcher it in the most humane way possible, and then make sure the meat is prepared and preserved in the best way possible to get to you. And so as a homesteader, a lot of times when people homestead, they'll do maybe a cow. Cows are kind of a bigger proposition, but certainly goats and chickens and things like that, and just have the milk from it or just have the eggs from it. Right. But sometimes also they'll raise some of their chickens that are going to be for making stew and stuff, or they'll
meat birds. They call them meat birds.
Meat birds, right? That's kind of a different kind of bird, actually, or maybe raise like one cow that's going to go into the freezer later, So depending on what a person's needs are, you have to learn how to best raise that animal to be as healthy and happy as possible, and has the best way to get that meat into your freezer, And so we're literally talking, learning how to humanely kill the animal, to butcher it, how to preserve the meat and take care of it.
Yeah. Now, along this topic that we're talking about right now, last week I did a video about the crossbow that I purchased, and I really need to talk about that just a little bit.
Just for a moment here.
Because quite frankly, I was really surprised, even shocked, at how many people were so upset by that. And that's, meat is just...
Go ahead.
Meat is just one of the things that we're talking about as far as overall prepping. And I had a lot of people, say something along the lines of, "I'm shocked that you would be talking about hunting." And I'm thinking, well, we're a prepper channel. That's one of the things that the overall aspect of prepping or homesteading is taking meat, whether you're going to raise it in your farm or whether you're going to hunt it.
We wanted to also just make sure we were straightening up any, I think, some misconceptions that maybe have been out there. This whole idea of getting deer meat is not a sport. Mm-hmm. It's not. We're not. This isn't like, well, why aren't you out in the woods tramping around, having fun, the sport of hunting? But that's not really the case for us. We just would like to be able to use that as a source of meat for us.
I'm not into the sport of hunting at all. I'm not into taking trophies. If I was, I would have been hunting decades ago.
Yeah.
I'm only getting interested in it because I'm interested in the meat, because I think food is going to be in short supply in the future.
Also, just it's a very clean, good meat for me to be able to have. Venison is one of the really good ones for me. And it's not like there's no joy in hunting the animal, no joy in shooting it. When Bill was talking about having fun with his crossbow, it's just the fun of hitting a target. He was...
Yeah, I did say this is fun, but I wasn't talking about hunting. I was talking about firing the crossbow into the target and getting a tight shot group.
Yeah.
And I said it would be fun to have a competition with other friends who have crossbows shooting at targets. I wasn't saying hunting was fun. I was saying shooting the crossbow into the target was fun.
And believe me, I was talking in my gardening video about how that the deer have been nibbling my roses, and it's a good thing we've covered the plants because they would eat them. Well, yeah, they live around here. They're trying to get food to eat. I would never, ever kill a deer or any other animal because it was eating my roses or getting into my garden.
Besides,
of course not.
there are enough deer around here that we could never kill enough to keep them out of the garden.
Right, we just have to figure out ways to protect our garden. But no, that would never be the motive at all for trying to get the deer as meat for our table. Another thing too is that these herds of deer don't have the big predators around like they used to. We do have some coyotes around, and there's foxes and stuff like that, but the deer used to be kept, the population was kept down by a lot of big predators, and we don't have them around as much anymore. So a lot of times if the deer herd gets really overgrown, and this really does happen, they start getting starving. They don't find enough to eat in a big herd, or they start getting sick, and so every game commission in most of the states analyzes what's going on with the herds and will issue enough of the right kind of licenses so that they can keep the deer populations, herds healthy, and so, here we, if we do on our land are able to get a deer, we don't have to have a direct license for that on our own land in this state.
Right.
But we still have a limit to the number that we're allowed to take.
Virginia, the limit this year in Virginia is 6 per hunter.
Yeah.
But even though we don't need a license if we're hunting on our own property, we still have to report the deer that we take so that they have idea of, controlling the herds.
Right, and controlling the hunting, so that nobody's overdoing it. And also, I hate the idea of elephants being killed for their ivory. That's horrible. I'm glad they don't do that on piano keys anymore. I would hate to have somebody kill a white rhino or kill anything that's at all endangered. That's just wrong. It's not necessary, But unless someone feels that they want to really be vegetarian or vegan, which is fine, people can grow a great homestead and work from a vegan or vegetarian viewpoint, of course. That's just your personal preference. I don't see anything in the Bible, in the Old Testament or the New Testament, that says that people are not supposed to ever eat meat. In fact, that's just not true at all. But if someone has the preference in their own life that they don't want to eat meat or have animal products, that's fine. That's your decision. Of course it is. But let's be real here. If someone is going to eat any kind of meat at all, then that was the life of an animal, whether it was a cow or a chicken somewhere or a deer. To have meat means that at some point someone had to kill an animal. And we can't be unrealistic about that. And so we're not trying to be mean to take an innocent life to have the meat. When I have a chicken for dinner, that was a chicken, you know. And so, and also, quite honestly, if someone is raising animals on a small homestead or hunting, that in a lot of ways, let's be realistic about this, the conditions of that animal are so much more humane than there is in a lot of the really full-scale animal stuff that goes on with
feedlots and all that.
Feedlots
and the buildings full of turkeys that are so fat from hormones they can't even walk and all that.
Right.
That is so inhumane. But animals that are raised on a small farm or deer that are hunted, they have a very happy, humane life, and their life is taken quickly. That's a much more humane way to do it than buying the commercially produced stuff.
And I'm not saying we're not supposed to buy commercially produced stuff. I'm just saying let's be real about this, you know. And one of the reasons why Bill works so hard to get very, very good with that, to hit a certain target, is because our goal is, if we're going to do this at all, we don't want the animal to suffer any more than absolutely necessary. And he knows he may have to follow it for a little while, but we want that to be as clean and good of a shot as possible.
Right.
You know,
as humanely as possible.
Right. So we just wanted to kind of touch on that. A lot of people have use hunting as a good way to supplement their own families' food, and it is a part of being prepared for an emergency, is to figure out ways to get that protein on the table if you want to eat a diet that includes meat or fish if you can, or raise fish. I don't know, whatever a person could do. My grandparents had 2 ponds on their farm where they had bass and catfish. It's just another way of putting the food that you might need on your table.
Yeah.
So, and I know that was me kind of doing all that, but I'm about as gentle a person as you could ever imagine. I'm not happy about having to something getting shot, but I'm realistic about it, and believe me, I will help prepare that meat, and I want to can it, and I'll be grateful for it, and very respectful of that animal's life. We do want to treat them with respect as much as we can and make sure that they are treated as well as we can. Planes and cars.
Waiting for a helicopter to fly over.
Yeah, there be planes and helicopters and cars around.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about prepping and we've talked about homesteading, and finished homesteading with talking about hunting and eating meat, and that leads right into the next category that was survivalist skills. And one of the skills of a survivalist is hunting or trapping, and that's something that you can't just go out and do if you haven't. You need to learn how to do it.
Yeah, you need to learn what you're doing.
And hunting, in that case, is not for sport. It's not for trophy taking. It's just for the meat. And when you do that, then you need to learn how to process it.
Yeah.
And also fishing.
If fish is going to be something that a person is going to be, using, then you need to learn how to fish. Make sure you've got what you need, and learn how to fish, and learn how to scale a fish, and how to clean a fish, and what fish taste like, and how to cook them. Just stuff like that.
And then trapping. If you're going to do any trapping of animals, there are many different types of traps. You build them in different ways. You need to practice with them, know how to use them, know where to use them, know maybe even the time of day to use them, that sort of thing.
Right.
And then foraging is a big part of survival skills.
And I think foraging is good wherever you live.
I'm fascinated with it, and I would love to learn it. But here's the problem with foraging. You need to learn how to forage for plants that grow in your local area, and that's hard to do. I mean, it wouldn't do me any good to learn about what kinds of cactus are edible, and I know many of them are, because there's no cactus that grow here.
Yeah.
That would be more appropriate in Arizona.
Right.
And if I lived in Arizona, it wouldn't do me any good to learn how to process the walnuts from an eastern black walnut tree, because there's no eastern black walnut trees that grow in Arizona. So it's got to be local. And that's the problem, and I have been trying to learn survival skills, and that's the problem, is I can't find anything about this local area.
Yeah, we need to find out how to do that.
Anything that I find, a book or a video or anything, they talk about plants that are possibly all over the continent or even all over the world, and they don't do me any good. So,
right. I mean, there's general stuff you can learn about, but yeah, learning your area, if there's some way to be able to find out what it is in your area. I also want to say, do not eat something, period, unless you have really been able to determine for sure what it is.
Yeah. If you eat the wrong thing, it could kill you very quickly.
An example, hostas are very edible. Lily of the valley are very poisonous. You wouldn't believe how much they look alike. So just make sure, even though foraging is such a good idea, make sure you really find out. And certainly with mushrooms, oh my goodness, anything that looks like a mushroom, make sure that you find out from somebody or know really what you're doing. But they can be wonderful to forage if you're sure you know what you're doing.
Right.
What's this with time of day?
Just if you're going to set a trap, is there a better time of day?
okay.
I already mentioned that, but I didn't expound on it.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry, I just saw it on the note.
Is it better to set a trap in the morning, before sunset? You know.
Right. Yeah, and you have to realize that the survivalist skills, you may be in a situation where that would not make sense for you at all. But like I said, foraging maybe could make sense for somebody, and fishing, and to some extent, some kind of hunting. So this is another aspect of what people can do so that they can still take care of themselves even if situations get really an emergency type of thing.
Even in fairly populated suburban areas, many times there's sections that are woods.
Right.
Either parks or just sections that haven't been developed yet. And I think that many times if people know how to forage, I think there's a wealth of edible plants in there that everybody drives past and doesn't even know about. So that's the kind of thing that I don't know that I want to learn.
I know that pussy willows, cat o' nine tails kind of things, watercress. There's a lot I've heard about that I really want to learn what I'm doing. We made a wonderful discovery, and this is almost foraging to me. Because one thing that is still thriving and going at this time of the year in my garden is my sweet potatoes. Because they are later. I'm letting them really have time. And oh my goodness, sweet potato leaves.
Yeah. Several of you mentioned in the comments that sweet potato leaves are edible. We still aren't completely sure whether they're supposed to be eaten raw like lettuce or cooked like spinach. But we tasted them raw and they tasted fine. So I even picked 3 sweet potato leaves to put on my cheeseburger for lunch.
Right. I think they're going to be wonderful in salads. And to me, that was almost a foraging thing because in my mind, I was just going to do the sweet potatoes. But I've discovered there's tops and greens on a lot of things that are wonderful and really double up my growing efforts. So there's also stuff out there growing wild that is edible.
But there's all kinds of stuff to learn because a few years ago I learned that dandelions, the entire plant is edible from the flower all the way down to the roots. So I thought, oh, cool. And I went out into the yard and I picked a few dandelion leaves.
Like older ones. I'm sorry.
Let me tell my story.
Sorry, go.
I picked a few dandelion leaves and made them into a nice salad, put a few tomatoes on there and some dressing and all that, and took a big bite, and it was horrible. And what I discovered through that was dandelions are great to eat in the spring when they're young and tender, but not at the end of August when they've been there and their leaves are this big and they're
bristly and nasty.
So that's just a point of learn. You got to learn ahead of time. You can't depend on dandelion leaves for greens in September. No.
I use dried dandelion root all the time in my coffee mixture with chicory. I don't know how to do that by myself yet, but I know that's what it is.
Right.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff out there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's it. We are a prepper channel, and so
along with a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, we cover many things, but as far as the prepping part of our channel, we really feel almost an obligation to cover the whole thing, not just one section, to cover prepping, homesteading, survival skills, and some of those would include hunting or butchering, and not that we're going to do that. We're not going to butcher, make a video of it.
Oh no, we're not going to do anything about the hunt or any butchering or anything on a video.
No.
You may see me canning already very carefully prepared meat. That we're not going to show any of the rest of it. If somebody needs to learn some skills about that, find a YouTube channel. I mean, you can find it on YouTube.
Yep, absolutely. You just do a search for butchering deer, and you'll find hundreds of videos about it.
And we're going to have help to know how to do it ourselves. And we have people around here that can help us. Just today, we were talking about our wood stove. And that we are so glad you will be seeing Bill getting all that installed and everything. We're putting in a wood stove. And I was thinking about how nice it is that this is set up so that I could easily cook on it if I needed to. And then I was thinking, but wow, the summers here are hot. If we were really in a real EOW, end of the world scenario, or things were a long-term emergency situation, I could cook on that wood stove. I could even can something, on that wood stove. But in the summer, it would be, wow, hot. And I'm so glad, I'm saying this for a reason, I'm so glad that we know how to make a really efficient rocket stove, so that I know I could still cook outside if I needed to. And so there's so many different skills that we want to share with you. That little rocket stove is very practical. It would really, really work, There's just things that we've wanted to share with you that we've come across or learned how to do ourselves or are trying to learn how to do, So, yeah, there's a lot of different things involved. We want all of you to be as well prepared as you can, no matter what would happen. And like Bill says all the time, what's your great motto? There is no... He can't read my mind. What's wrong with him? There is no downside.
Oh, yes, of course. I didn't know what you were talking about. There's no downside to being prepared.
There just
really,
isn't.
Truly. I mean, people scoff at us for being prepared, but, why? It doesn't affect them, and there's no downside, because if nothing ever happens, then we've got all of this food and preps for us into our old age.
Yeah,
It's an investment for the future, because anything you spend on prepping now, whatever you buy, is only going to cost more in the future.
Right.
So it just makes sense, and there's no downside at all to being prepared.
And I would love to know that if somebody around me needed something, I can help them. Now, there's no downside to it. We're also not at the store having to buy stuff when everybody else needs to buy it.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
So there it is. We are a prepper channel. We want to give you as many skills as we can, whether it's prepping skills, homesteading skills, or survival skills.
Right.
Take your pick. The ones you want to learn, go for it. If we do something that you're not interested in, don't watch that video.
Right. And yeah, just watch whatever you feel like would be helpful to you. And we try to be really honest about stuff. And if for some reason you don't like, if I'm canning meat and you don't want to watch it, please don't watch it.
Right.
Of course not. You want to watch me quilt? I'll try to do that. So, yeah.
So,
thanks for,
go ahead.
I was going to say, thanks for hanging in there with all of our blathering today.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. We've kind of wandered a lot, but hopefully we've given some good information.
Yes.
I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it makes sense. And, go back through it and look at the skills we talked about and decide which ones you want to work on.
Right. What do you really need?
Right.
Absolutely. And I know this may not seem like it's live simple, live free, but believe me, the combination of being as out of debt as you can with knowing that you've got either the skills or the resources to take care of things if something should go wrong, there is a real sense of freedom in that. And there is a simplicity in that I appreciate. So we can still say, live simple.
Live free.
Live free, yes.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. You be blessed.
Yes, we love you guys. We will see you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.